Introduce Heather Grady, the Vice President for Foundation Initiatives at Rockefeller Foundation. Before joining Rockefeller, Heather was the Managing Director of Realizing Rights, the Ethical Globalization Initiative. And prior to that, had several leadership posts within Oxfam, Great Britain. So please join me in welcoming Heather.
Thank you, Christina. And good morning and welcome to everyone. I see a lot of old friends here today, so it's great to have you all. I want to extend special thanks to Intellecap and APCO, our partners in today's event, and to our panelists who have agreed to provide their insights on the roles and opportunities for the private sector. I also want to thank Dr. Cristina Romaitis del Rio, Julie Carandang, and Ashwin Dayal, who put in so much effort to bring today's event from an idea to reality. I started focusing on climate change in 2007 while working for the organization Realizing Rights. An early assignment was doing some analysis and writing that led me to delve into the Stern report of the previous year, written by Nick Stern, a former chief economist of the World Bank. It's fair to say that up until then, climate change had been a topic rooted largely in the world of scientists, environmentalists, and treaty negotiators. It wasn't anywhere near the mainstream of development NGOs or UN agencies. And it was only when the Stern report came out that climate change came onto the radar screen of mainstream economists. The report concluded that the costs of inaction on climate change were far higher than the costs of action. And it seems incredible now that anyone had to go to a lot of effort to prove that back then. The report also noted this: climate change presents a unique challenge for economists. It is the greatest and widest-ranging market failure ever seen. In my work on climate change since then, I've been struck by two truths. The first is that climate change is an issue that links all humans on the planet as no other does. We share one atmosphere, and we truly hold a shared responsibility for both reducing greenhouse gas emissions and supporting efforts to help vulnerable communities adapt to and build resilience to climate change. The second truth is that this enormous challenge is a classic multi-stakeholder issue, and it's only when the private sector in great measure joins governments and civil society organizations in addressing climate change that we'll make significant progress. So for these reasons, I'm particularly pleased that we're hosting this event today. Because of the interdependence of markets and the regionless operations around the globe, the private sector has a fundamental role and responsibility in shaping and supporting the way forward. As many of you know, the two sides of the climate change coin are mitigation, interventions to reduce emissions and the rate of climate change, and adaptation, adapting to the inevitable change that will affect us all. People often think of businesses as interested only in the mitigation side, and we know many efforts underway in terms of developing carbon markets, areas like greening production facilities and supply chains. But we think it's very important that the private sector, as well as governments and nonprofits, pay more attention to the opportunities for building resilience to climate change. The growing pace, of course, as we all know, has surprised even the scientific community. Global temperatures have risen at worrying pace, much greater climate variability, unpredictable rainfall patterns, more frequent and severe storms, greater loss of Arctic ice and glaciers, and rising sea levels. We know that the public often hears about the dangers of a rise of just 2 degrees, and let's remember that's 2 degrees Celsius on an average Earth temperature of just 15 degrees. That's an enormous increase indeed. However, we know that we're also facing a lot of climate doubters around the world, and so the more that all of us can get involved in this issue, the more we can make progress quickly. More and more people have realized that these challenges face people, poor and vulnerable communities around the world in ways that they never have before. We know that the inexorable rise of sea level, which will bring mounting costs to all coastal cities, farming and other lowland communities on coasts and river deltas, is a challenge that we've only begun to address. The Stern report in 2006 focused attention on future losses, but we all know that the changes are here today. A report by the International Energy Agency noted that greenhouse gas emissions from global society's energy use were the highest ever in 2010. And regrettably, prospects for securing an ambitious, inclusive global climate deal anytime soon appeared weak at the close of the UN climate talks in Bonn recently. The work of the Rockefeller Foundation in this area began in 2007 and forms an important contribution to our foundation's two overall goals of building resilience and promoting equitable growth. And we have a particular focus on poor and vulnerable people. As we were considering what to support in this area, we felt that many institutions were already working on the area of mitigation, but that far too few were working on adaptation. So we launched an initiative called Building Climate Change Resilience, within which we support dozens of grantees around the world. We believe that some risks require not just adaptation, but something more, greater resilience. Our foundation defines climate change resilience as the capacity of an individual, community, or institution to dynamically and effectively respond to shifting climate change risks and impacts while continuing to function at an acceptable level. Put simply, it's the ability to anticipate and prepare for and to survive and recover from the effects of climate change. Of course, these areas, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, are not mutually exclusive, and indeed they're complementary. But today we're focusing our discussion on resilience. The Rockefeller Foundation is providing $70 million over a period of several years to catalyze attention, funding, and action towards successful approaches to building climate change resilience. A key part of this is our Asian Cities Climate Change Resilience Network, also known as ACCCRN, which my colleague Ashwin Dayal will be talking about in more detail. This initiative works across 10 cities in 4 countries, India, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Another important component of this initiative is leading on integrating climate change information and concerns into agricultural development practices in Africa. And we also support the development of U.S. adaptation, resilience policies and practices, and support domestic and international adaptation measures. We've been looking at this more and more in the context of the United States as well. Many of you know that we also have an initiative called Harnessing the Power of Impact Investing, which is predicated upon our belief that the world's philanthropic and government resources will never be enough to tackle the social and environmental problems that our world faces. We have to find ways to bring more of the vast resources of the private sector into financing solutions to these problems in countries around the world. So today's event is an example of bringing the work of these two initiatives together. Let me just turn for a moment to the urban focus. Over the last few years, we reached the point where more of humanity was residing in urban areas than outside of them. The population living in cities is expected to increase from 50 to 70%, or 6.4 billion people by 2050. Asian cities are expected to see more than 60% of this increase, and it's estimated that just under half of all urban population growth will occur in cities with fewer than 500,000 residents. The shifting of population from principally rural to principally urban areas has fundamentally changed the nature of our relationship with the planet and with each other. As some have said, after millennia of experience as a rural species, we have comparatively limited experience as city dwellers. This deepening urbanization poses fundamental challenges for communities as they grow in the face of climate change risks and impacts. And several of you here today have mentioned that we have so much attention given so far to adaptation in rural areas and on agriculture and much less on urban areas. While cities may appear to have greater resilience because of their infrastructure assets, we know that in fact many of these assets are aging, fragile, or non-existent, and are unquestionably under pressure. Moreover, cash-strapped city governments and poor people who live in cities may be in no position to provide for or access the infrastructure and services required. And in the many cities I've visited in recent years looking at this problem, I'm thinking, for example, of the city of Monrovia in Liberia that I visit frequently, and the slum area called West Point, where the sea level rise and the incidence of increased flooding is having a phenomenal impact on hundreds of thousands of people. Climate change is a major threat to cities, and in future could become the preeminent threat to food supply, water supply, sanitation, shelter, and public health. It exacerbates an already precarious situation resulting from unplanned urban growth. But yet, cities can be the fulcrum of positive change for whole societies, as indeed they have been throughout history. They've been the route to prosperity and social progress for virtually all countries around the world. So this brings us to the key challenges and opportunities which we'll focus on today. The threat is an immense funding gap between what needs to be done and the resources already committed. The opportunity is a myriad of ways to create value, from building resilience to climate change. The annual adaptation funding requirements are estimated at US $86 billion, while funds pledged for adaptation are a mere fraction of this. So governments and donor funding cannot meet the emerging needs on their own. Equally important, very little is prioritized for use in cities, as I've said. So we see the tremendous opportunity for the private sector in responding to these dual challenges. Community risks are business risks. Irrespective of whether a business is entirely local or operates in multiple markets, as multinational corporations do, the community is not an abstract stakeholder concept. It's businesses' customers, consumers, suppliers, and employees. In that sense, the well-being of urban communities is directly related to corporate health, economic performance, and growth. Moreover, businesses are heavily dependent on local resources, services, and infrastructure in their operations. By addressing urban climate change resilience, businesses are also ensuring themselves from the inevitable impacts on their supply chains and looking after the health and well-being of their employees. Businesses that make these connections and adapt to climate change with community needs in mind will gain a competitive edge. Developing a strategy for climate change resilience will bring benefits in other ways, which I know our panelists will delve into in more detail. They include, first, corporate reputation at the community, consumer, shareholder, and investor levels, economic risk and financial performance. As several recent studies have shown, prevention is far cheaper than relief and recovery. A third is that companies that incorporate climate change resilience strategies will be on the front foot vis-a-vis inevitable changes in public policy frameworks that will require an adaptive response. And fourth, finding new markets and investor value. As business models evolve to meet emerging adaptation needs, this will stimulate private capital, and this will be essential to businesses. Businesses, we know, are good at moving quickly to leverage new opportunities and create new markets. The private sector commands a wealth of human and capital resources. It's heavily invested in IT and management systems that develop and deliver products and services. Businesses embody innovation and entrepreneurship. But at the same time, current business models often result in short-termism, and they steer clear of the sustained effort needed to respond to long-term community and consumer demands. So creating links and collaboration between private sector engagement, public investment, and civil society actors is key, and will help develop and extend the existing public-private partnerships. We'll need innovative and evolving models of cooperation between these sectors. Today, we'll hear from our panelists about existing activities and models which various companies have developed, the level of interest from the investor community that has either facilitated such efforts or in some cases held them back. We'll explore what companies are already doing or can do to build climate change resilience. And we'll learn about ways to unlock investment around new opportunities and harness capital to bring these opportunities to scale. I anticipate that by the end of today, we'll all have a much deeper understanding of this landscape, and I look forward to us together identifying both the building blocks and indicators for success in both building resilience and engaging the private sector and investor community. I want to just add that we're so pleased to have many notable people in the room today, including Dr. Juan Jose de Boo of the Global Adaptation Institute, who previously held positions as the Finance Minister of El Salvador and Managing Director of the World Bank, and also Dr. Farouk Khan, who has so thoughtfully chaired the UN's Adaptation Fund in recent years. On behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation, I'd like to thank you all again for joining us in what I'm sure will be a robust and fruitful discussion around the business of climate change. Thank you.